We are going to start a series today on the life, the rise and fall of Solomon. I think the series is formally referred to as The Man Who Had It All. And we are going through this on all of our locations, Mill Creek, Seattle, and Spokane. And today is a little bit different. If you've been a part of Venture for any length of time, even the way that I'm laying out the message today, a little bit different than my typical style. We're actually going to look at it as an overview, as an introduction to this series. We're not going to get too deep, too fast, but we're going to set the table so that over the next 2 or 3 weeks, you're going to take a much deeper dive into the rise and the fall of this man named Solomon. So bear with us today as it's more of an introduction and an overview. You might notice as well, some of you asked, isn't Jersey Sunday next week, not this week? Why are you wearing a baseball jersey? I have to say, first off, pitchers and catchers report in like 3 weeks. And for me, it's almost like a national holiday. I'm the only man left on this planet who loves baseball proudly. And when your team wins 3 of the last 6 years and you're a dynasty, you can wear your jersey whenever you want. But really, the reason why I'm wearing this is to remind you to wear a jersey next week or some form of sports apparel. So enjoy that. It'll be a fun time as we root on the Seahawks. And then also, I was hoping that this winning team would kind of rub off on, hopefully the first Super Bowl win in the last 15 years and the beginning of what might become a dynasty, but let's just get one win and call it good. And then also, honestly, the main reason why I'm wearing this jersey is because I'm ashamed, right? I'm ashamed of who I am when I watch baseball, okay? It's true. This is a fun fact. My wife, and I quote, she says this about me. She says, "I don't like baseball, Justin." Like, she says that. Now, I love my wife no matter what, but whatever, but she says, "I don't like baseball, Justin." And it's because I waited like 30 years through heartache when it came to baseball. Every year, my team would get so close, and then they would blow it in October. And even now that they win considerably, and they spend a lot of money, which I love, go capitalism. But when they do that, I think to myself that not this time, they're going to break my heart like they used to. I've been conditioned to think the worst. I'm not a half glass empty guy. Someone's going to pick up the glass and throw it in my face guy. That's how I approach life, to be honest with you. I have spent way too much time preparing, preventing, predicting the worst case scenario. It's a terribly unhealthy way to live. And I wish I was joking, but these are things I have to wrestle with. And that's not who I was created to be, right? That's not how we were created to look at life. That's not a life of faith grounded in Christ, centered upon Jesus. And so I want to talk about some of those things with you today. I've been in those moments in life where I've thought way too much of myself. I've thought that I was stable and secure, that I had finally, quote unquote, made it, right? And then that rug gets pulled out from under you and you're humbled a little bit. And in my case, a lot bit, right? And there's those moments where you realize that your job can change, right? Your relationship status can change within a blink of an eye. Those things happen all of the time. And even your relationships over time, your children, right? There's those moments where you have to start letting go and send off. And that interdependence, independence piece. And then some of us in the room, we're seeing even our parents, our relationship with them change, where we're having to take care of them or we're having to make some hard decisions. All of those things that you thought were secure and stable and forever, sometimes we find they're not. And we have to ask that question, what is the foundation of my life? What am I trying to build here on earth? What's going to last? What's worth the investment? What's worth the cost? And this is why we're in this series, The Man Who Had It All, The Rise and Fall of Solomon. So I want you to consider this for a moment. The things that we are investing in, the things that we are building, the things that matter to us the most, is it more about our security and our stability, things like power and prestige and possessions, right? Are those the things that we're holding on to? Some people would say that's empire building because we're building things based upon our own satisfaction, our own gratification, our own self-righteousness, for people to look at us and go, man, that person has it all together, right? Or are we living life based upon God's kingdom, where we're willing to hold things loosely, where we're willing to live a life of surrender and submission and sacrifice? Those are the things we want to ask, not just today, but throughout this entire series. Am I building an empire, or am I living life in God's kingdom? So with that, I want us to go to Scripture today. We're going to handle it a little bit differently. I typically like to camp out in one text and let the text speak to us. But in this case, because we're introducing a series and an overview, I'm actually going to go to 3 or 4 different places and just give you a glimpse of Solomon's life, a preview, if you will, like a trailer before a film. But I want us to go, as you go to 1 Kings chapter 1, you're going to have it on the screen. You're going to have it on your smartphone if you download a Bible app or if you have a Bible with you. So 1 Kings chapter 1. Before we go there, let me give you the quick context. You and I, whether we want to admit it or not, were created to be image bearers for our God. He designed us to reflect Him and represent Him, both male and female together. He gave us this command. He gave us this commission, so to speak. And He basically told us to do a few things. He told us to be fruitful. He told us to multiply. He told us to fill this earth. That together we were to bring honor and glory and goodness and greatness to His name. But our ancestors and all of us in this room have at one time in our life or another decided to create conflict. We decided to play little gods ourselves, to act as if we were in control when we were not. And all that sin did, when we shook our fists to heaven and said, watch this, I can do it better, all it did was create division and dissension and ultimately death. We are broken, and our world around us, because of that, is very broken. But God, in His covenant faithfulness to us, continues to pursue us. So He not only gave Adam and Eve an opportunity by covering their sin and giving them an opportunity to live and continue this story of humanity, it continues to go through all of Genesis. Now, if you go on YouTube, you can go back to our series on Genesis, and you can relive some of those moments that show the dysfunction of humanity and the faithfulness of our God. And here's a few of those moments. He finds Noah, and when humanity had fallen so far and so fast that humanity really needed a do-over, a 2.0, God spares Noah and his immediate and extended family and gives them one more opportunity. He is faithful to them when humanity was unfaithful towards Him. He closed that ark, He closed that door, He protected them, and He allowed them to continue on. He marked that covenant with a rainbow. Then he goes to Abraham. He finds Abraham, and He promises him a lineage. He promises him a legacy. He promises him a land of promise where his descendants can gather, and that God can abide, that God can dwell and be at the center of that place, that community, and they can worship Him, and they can be blessed, and then they can be a blessing to the surrounding nations by revealing who the one true God is and will be. And then you look at Moses, and that covenant was marked with, as Abraham's was marked with circumcision, Moses was given a law, and his was marked, Moses was given the law of how to live, and his covenant was marked with the Passover meal. this opportunity to remember God's salvation when their enemies of Egypt were destroyed. Then there's David, who is the second king, but the great king, and he was promised that his throne would not pass away. And that throne would then be passed on to his son, Solomon. And that's where we're at today. So you see God's covenant faithfulness and these outward marks reminding the people of Israel who God is, what he is about, and how they can play a part in that redemptive story. And here, as we find Solomon, here's a few things I want you to consider. First off, for the next 3 weeks, you are in for a treat because you're going to be introduced to a man who is a part of one of the most beautiful and simultaneously heartbroken moments in the time and history and the stories of Israel. You're going to see Solomon soar to such great heights, but you're also, when he's surrendering to God, submitting to God, waiting on God, trusting God, you're also going to see Solomon fall fast in those moments. He's going to be afraid. He's going to doubt. He's going to disobey. He's going to chase riches and prosperity and power and prestige. There's these moments and pleasure. There's these moments where you're going to be reminded that you're going to see ancient Israel at the height of their reflection, representation of God, and you're also going to see a fall led by their king. You're going to see incredible beauty. You're also going to be exposed to some serious soul ache. But you're also going to be reminded of this, that sometimes we forget that when we read the scriptures that everyone in this Bible, aside from one, everybody is a mess. Everyone is very human. We sometimes bring these people up to be like these perfected heroes, and we forget that it was God who found them. It was God who worked in and through them. It was God who chose them and used them to bring his plan into reality. So let's go ahead and read some selected texts I want to bring to your attention today. The first one being 1 Chronicles 22, 9 through 10. It is on the screen. Because I'm going to be jumping around so much today, you might want to focus your attention there. And it says this, "But you," talking to King David, "you will have a son who will be a man of peace. I will give him peace with his enemies and all the surrounding lands. His name will be Solomon. And I will give him peace and quiet. I will give peace and quiet to Israel during his reign. He is the one who will build a temple, a place for God to dwell and be the center of this faith community to honor God's name. He will be my son, and I will be his father, and I will secure the throne of the kingdom over Israel forever." So think about this again in the context of what we're talking about. Are we building empires, or are we going to trust in God's kingdom? Are we going to live lives striving for security and stability and success? Or are we going to live lives marked by submission, surrender, and sacrifice to the one true God? This is the dilemma laid before Solomon, and you see kind of that foretelling, that prophecy of his life given to David in 1 Chronicles 22. In 2 Samuel 12, it says this. This is when David, and I'll get to the context of this a little bit later, but David comforted his wife Bathsheba, and he slept with her. She became pregnant and gave birth to a son, and David then named him Solomon. The Lord loved the child and sent word through Nathan the prophet that they should name him also Jedediah, which means this, beloved of the Lord, or the friend of God, as the Lord had commanded. And then I'm going to jump to 1 Kings chapter 1. 1 Kings chapter 1 says this in verse 29 and 30 and then 37. "And the king repeated his vow." King David repeated this, "As surely as the Lord lives, who has rescued me from every danger, your son Solomon will be the next king and will sit on my throne this very day, just as I vowed to you before the Lord, the God of Israel." And jumping to 37, and may the Lord be with Solomon as he has been with you, my Lord, the king. And may he make Solomon's reign even greater than yours. Speaking of David. So we jumped around a lot today. Let me unpack a few of those. And remember, over the next few weeks, we are going to go a whole lot deeper. So please be patient with us as we just give that quick overview of Solomon's life. First off, I want to point out this, that Solomon was never supposed to be king. We'll get to that in a moment. But okay, I should probably start here. I read the scriptures, but let me also go to the great prophecies and teachings of Stan Lee from Marvel, the Marvel Universe. And let's go to the book of Spider-Man, shall we? And if you've seen any of these movies or read any of these sacred texts, you will find that the book will say this, right? I think it was the uncle said this to Spidey, with great power comes great responsibility. It's sad that we know Marvel over Scripture, but that's okay. There is some truth to those superhero myths. But the point is I want to add on to that. With great power comes great responsibility and greater temptation. Now, I don't know about you, but I've had moments where I have lacked. I have had moments where, as I alluded to earlier, where my life was kind of turned upside down. And just when I thought, my career was taking off and I thought I had quote unquote arrived, life has a funny way of saying you haven't, right? And when you're in poverty or when you when you have to trust in God for your daily bread or your weekly paycheck, right, to meet every need for you and for your family, you know and I know that those who are caught who are struggling in poverty have their own set of struggles and their own set of temptations because there's desperation and there's this sense of great weight, and you're actually tempted sometimes to do things that you normally would not do because the need is so great. You've been there, or you know people who have been, right? And it helps us to have empathy for those individuals. But on the flip side of that, those who have a whole lot, those who have that power and those possessions and that popularity, that comes with a whole other set of temptation. Why? Because first off, we start believing that we earned it, that we deserve it, that it's ours, that it's for our power, it's for our purposes, and that I finally arrived and therefore I can do whatever I want, whenever I want, however I want. And also sometimes it draws people to us that will tell us what we want to hear, and they reinforce this lie, and we really do start believing in things that are completely contrary to God's character. You guys following me? I think this is kind of why Jesus warns those with wealth. He says it's easier for a camel to enter into an eye of a needle than it is for those with prestige to enter into his kingdom, because we can start believing in some of those false narratives. I also think this is why Jesus warned a lot of his disciples that if he trusts you with much, right, much will then be required of you. We don't like the required part. We like the much, right? And so you're going to see this in Solomon's life and times. You're going to see that he was entrusted with a lot, and therefore a lot was required of him. And I'll be honest with you, there were moments in his life where he wasted some of those opportunities. But also, we don't want to miss that he was born, honestly, as a sign of God's restoration in David and Bathsheba's life. You've read the story. We've touched on it at Venture a few times, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time here this morning, but in a quick nutshell, you know that David had everything. He was the king of Israel. He was doing really well, so well, in fact, that he stayed back from battle, which was unlike him, and it was these moments that he was tempted to take a woman who was not his wife, who was actually a wife of someone who was fighting his battles, And so he committed adultery. He used his power to really sexually assault someone else. And she ends up becoming pregnant, Bathsheba, and he tries to cover it up. So much so that he decides to murder the husband. So you can see how sin grips us, and it really steals from us, and it ends up killing, right? This is what sin does. This is what rebellion does. It feels good for a moment, but the price is way too much. David ends up being confronted by a prophet that he trusted. He ends up repenting. God still, in his justice, in his providence, in his sovereignty, decides to take this child from them. So now they experience loss and grief that you and I can only begin to imagine how that weight would have been on both of them. And in the midst of that, then God in his faithfulness and his covenant faithfulness and his goodness says, I'm going to give you another child. And I want you to name this child Solomon. Or David names him Solomon, which in the Hebrew, it's very close to shalom or peace. In the midst of this conflict, in the midst of this crisis, in the midst of the world just shattering before David and Bathsheba, God inserts peace, shalom, Solomon. And the prophet, who I believe confronted David earlier, says you also want to name him Jedediah because he's going to be loved by God. He's going to be a friend of God. He's going to know God in ways that we long to know him. Here's the promise in the midst of the turmoil. And this is what God is saying to Solomon, even as an infant. Don't build the empire. Be a man of peace. Be one who is my friend. Be one who is loved. Don't worry about the security and the stability and the success and making a name for yourself. No, please be a man of peace. Be my friend. Work with me here. And in that, you're going to live a life of surrender, of submission, of sacrifice. And so, also, let's not lose this idea that Solomon was not by law the rightful heir to the throne. David had other children and boys who were older, and one of them, specifically the oldest, should have been king. Now, I'm the oldest brother, and so I prefer the Old Testament law where it talks about us being able to make all the decisions when the parents pass. But I also see in Genesis and throughout Scripture, in God's providence, he chooses other sons, other children, saying, hey, listen, it's my favor, it's my grace. I don't like that part of the gospel as much as the other stuff. But this is one of those examples. So the older brother decides to, he builds a regime. He surrounds himself with dangerous leaders and fierce military commanders. He's ready for the coup. Bathsheba overhears this. Mama Bear, she goes to David, tells him about what's happening. She says, don't you remember Solomon, my son, your son? He's supposed to be the king. And it's here then that David prays that prayer and recognizes that the throne that will not pass away is going to be passed on first to Solomon. Solomon will be favored with position. He will be granted wisdom and stature and honor and resources. But you're also going to see throughout the next few weeks, he's going to be tempted with pride, excess, and abuse of power. Some of that's going to lead to lives being destroyed. We have a choice: empire, kingdom. Matthew chapter 6, Jesus, who now sits on that throne, by the way, that Davidic throne that does not pass away, as the Messiah and the Christ. When he was on earth, he taught his disciples. He warned them. He warned them of this. He says, don't store up treasures here on earth where moths can eat them and rust can destroy them. Don't worry about your clothing. Don't worry about how you look, how you're perceived, what people think of you. No, he compared us to those lilies of the field that are far more beautiful and glorious than anything King Solomon ever wore. If God can take care of those flowers, the birds in the air, how much more does he care about you and care about me? And he goes on to say this, with that in mind, seek first God's kingdom. Above all else, live righteously, and he will meet your needs. Security, stability, success, surrender, submission, sacrifice. When it's all said and done, what's our life and our legacy going to point to? The empire or the kingdom? And I would take it, if you don't mind, I would even apply it to our church. We're still very young, and change can come easy to us because we don't have yet a lot of history to lean on. And that's a blessing, I think. It's easy for us to acknowledge where we've fallen short and to make those course corrections. It's simpler for us to say, we're not building an empire here. It's never, ever, ever going to be about venture. In fact, it's never really going to be about the church. The hope of the world is not in a church. The hope of the world is in Jesus Christ. But we as the church have been entrusted with that mission to share and show the gospel while we're still here on earth. And collectively, we can then pursue submission, surrender, sacrifice for Christ and Christ alone. That's why last week at our Vision Sunday, we talked about giving. We don't talk about giving because we need more money. God's going to take care of the church. And even if the church passes away, his mission here in Spokane continues. The reason why money is so important, it's a part of our discipleship. It's near and dear to our hearts. That so often we talk about things like success and stability that's tied to our finances. When we talk about success, we talk about sacrifice and surrender. It's tied to our finances. And I just want you to consider what's the most nearest and dearest items connected to your heart, and how can you turn that into worship to Jesus? I understand that there's pride in good hard work, and that our careers or our vocation can be worship to Jesus. Absolutely. We are just as much on mission when we're in the marketplace in the real world as we are on a Sunday morning. I believe that with all my heart. That we have spiritual gifts that are given to us to show and to share gospel with those who are around us. And we get that paycheck once a week or once a month. We should say, yeah, I worked really hard for that, and take it seriously. But I also want you to consider this, that it's God who gave you the breath to breathe. He gave you the health to work. He gave you that job. He orchestrated events to prepare you for that job interview and to give you the wisdom and the gift set to actually apply yourself, and that your money is his money, because all that is on earth is his. And that's why for us at Venture, when we ask you to take steps in that journey, for some of us to give for the very first time to a local church takes faith in Jesus and in your spiritual authority. For some of us to give regularly is going to take a change, a shift in our budget. For some of us to give proportionally a tithe, it's going to take us to recognize that Jesus can do more with less. And then for others of us, to give to kingdom builders is a really big step. Because I'll be honest with you, when you give to kingdom builders, you are not giving to venture. You're giving to church, you're giving to global missionaries. You're giving to local nonprofits here in Spokane in the Northwest. And you're giving to future church plants. And most of those individuals that we're giving towards, we're not going to meet this side of heaven. So nothing about it is selfish. And it's hard to be selfless with what is quote unquote ours. But it's a good practice, a good exercise in not being about empire and more about being about kingdom. Let me give you a quick highlight about where some of your money towards kingdom builders goes. Before I do that, I'm going to throw up a QR code for you. And the reason why I'm throwing this up is if you can scan that with your phone, because this might answer some of your questions that you have about kingdom builders. That phrase, you probably aren't aware. If you're new to Venture, it's new to you. And this just goes towards our global and local missionaries and partners and future church plants. And this page will give you some answers to questions that you might have. So I invite you to scan it and then just hold that page and read about it later. Or you can ask me after the gathering this morning, and I would love to talk to you about kingdom builders, our oversight, our accountability, all of that. So I'll give you a second to scan that. But I more importantly want to share with you where this money is going. So if you would go to the next, here's a picture of 4 lovely children, Immaculate, Felix, Esther, and Brenda. And these are some of our children initially from Compassion International that have been sponsored by people at Venture, Mill Creek, Spokane, Seattle. That many people have adopted children through Compassion International and supporting them on a monthly basis. This is part of Kingdom Builders. What's so amazing about this story is these 4, when they were initially a part of this program, they were all orphans. They are now graduates of the state high school, which is a gigantic achievement for anybody, let alone those who had to show resilience and courage because they did not have some of the support systems in place that a lot of us were born into. They had people that prayed for them and gave towards them, and an organization that was trustworthy that helped them along that journey. And they have relationship with some at Venture Mill Creek. Pretty amazing story, actually. Then Convoy of Hope. We talk about Convoy all the time. And sometimes it becomes white noise. But please don't mistake us. I've been to places where Convoy of Hope is. I've seen their work firsthand, not only in Haiti, I've seen it in the United States. And I'm proud to tell you that in 2025, Convoy of Hope was serving at every single major national disaster across the world in 2025. Every single major disaster, they were there, including, by the way, the flooding that happened in North Seattle and the pass. They were there. That's where your money goes. Also, Convoy of Hope not only does disaster relief and they plant crops, but here's what I love about, if you research Convoy of Hope, they actually partner with single mothers and help give them a step up by helping them create their own small businesses, helping them to become entrepreneurs, self-sustaining, and investing in their own neighborhoods. This is what Convoy of Hope does. This is where your kingdom builders' money goes. Clean water, shelter, food, disaster relief, sharing and showing the gospel all across the world and in the United States. So I would encourage you to read up on that QR code, that website that I shared with you, and to ask the question, am I willing to give to something selflessly where I myself might never benefit from, because I believe in God's kingdom work. You're going to hear more about that next week. Would you stand with me this morning? And I want us to think about this for a moment. We can't celebrate our third birthday without thinking about our first one. That was a doozy. Phew. For those of you who are a part of that joyful day, let me tell you, there wasn't many of you there. We've had some good times. We've had some hard times. That trailer that we used to have to, I say we, I can't be trusted with a trailer to save my life. But those of you who drove that trailer, Bob, right, and others that were incredibly courageous through ice, through sleet, mail carriers. How about this? How about the months, maybe the year, where Pastor Marissa and her group set up a kids ministry environments, knowing that we hadn't had a kid in there for months or a year. And now today we get to see 2 children be baptized in water. So it's the faithfulness not of us, though there is faithfulness in this room. I don't want to downplay that. Your campus pastor, your location pastor, Amanda, she has prayed for this church relentlessly and worked very hard and led a team with great courage. But I want to focus more on this, the faithfulness of Jesus for us these last 3 years. And if he has been faithful in the past and the present, you better believe he's got us in the future. And the small things we prayed for, he's answered. So I'm going to continue to believe he's going to continue to answer for us from here on out. But as he does that, let's just make sure we're not building an empire. We're not building a name for ourselves. We're not trying to make sure this thing lasts. We're not working really hard so it'll be secure and stable and quote unquote successful. I mean, it would be nice, right, to have to see people added to the church daily, to have our own building that we could use for our community. I pray those things all the time, but I got to check my motives. I got to check my heart and say, is it about us or is it about his kingdom? And so if that's the case, if it's about his kingdom, then I've got to continue to live a life of submission, of surrender, of sacrifice, holding this church that I've grown to love, but hold it loosely and just offer it up to Jesus and say, do with us what you will, right? So let's do that today. It's okay when we baptize some kiddos. We celebrate with the family because lives have been changed. But let's also simultaneously pray, Jesus, will you continue to fill that tank with our friends and our family and even our enemies, and that you would make us into the faith community that you have created us to be. May your kingdom come. May your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Let's pray. Jesus, I thank you for this 3 years of covenant faithfulness. I thank you ultimately that you are very much in control. And like Amanda prayed earlier, texts like this and the life of Solomon reminds me that the people in our world who claim to have all the power and all the answers, I'm reminded that they don't. I'm reminded that, Jesus, you are on that throne that was given to Solomon, and that you rule and you reign. And it gives me an entirely different perspective, because now I'm going to go out not with anxiety and stress and worry and trying to achieve and trying to meet needs that are mine and those whom I love, but instead I'm going to go out with great faith, that I'm going to go out with this heartbeat that I'm going to worship you in spirit and in truth, and that my life and the lives of all those in this room are to bring honor and glory to your name. That call to Adam and Eve to be image bearers has not changed. We are to, by the power of Christ and his Spirit, we are to reflect and represent you on this earth and in this community. And we will do that in faith. In Jesus' name, we love you.